Can these protests pose a threat to the Chinese system? Remember, the USSR seemed very stable from the outside till all of a sudden it wasn't. And a lot of Western analysts have for the longest time raised questions about what happens behind that dark hole, saying that there isn't as much clarity about data about what's really going on as there is in other liberal democracies. And therefore, could these protests, are you at all concerned, unleash a series of events which raise a very serious question about the legitimacy of the Chinese system?
Allow me to emphasize, no country is as united as China is, especially after the successful conclusion of the 20th Party Congress. China has a clear vision about what it wants to achieve for the coming 5 years, what it wants to achieve by 2035, and what it wants to achieve by the middle of this century. And this is China in the real essence of the word. Now, protests express the different voices, etc., which contain legitimate points in asking for relaxation of the restrictions, of course. But on the other hand, some of the political voices they express are completely detached from the ground. I think the Chinese nation, in the overwhelming majority of our Chinese population, treasure the stability of the political system. We want to rally behind the government. We want to make sure that China will continue to rise economically, and this is the megatrend. I don't think these protests will disrupt this megatrend by any stretch of the imagination. Now, on the other hand, for a big country like China, protests should be considered normal. They should not really upturn the situation in any fundamental sense of the word. China is very strong, and China is not very fragile, for example, as some of the people may worry about. No, China is one of the strongest countries, most united in the world now.
So you say various things, and I want to build on the fact that you said that protests shouldn't really be a big deal, Brahmachalani. In most countries they aren't. The farmers' protests, the land acquisition protests in the United States are commonplace, as they should be. But those are countries where protests are common. In China, protests aren't common. That one guy unfurled one banner ahead of the Communist Party Congress, that itself created a flutter, and now here there are literally hundreds of people, young kids and older people, out on the roads. Is this just a normal protest to be dealt with no more seriously than you deal with any other protest in India, the US or elsewhere? Or do you think it's raising prickly questions that the mandarins in Beijing aren't used to answering to their public?
Participating in any protest in China takes much courage, as it comes with great personal risk. If you protest against the government and you raise slogans against the president like the current protesters are doing, then you're going to land up in jail. Many will just simply disappear. In fact, hundreds have already been arrested. And yet the protests are not only continuing, they're spreading. And they're spreading to new cities. The 1989 Beijing massacre at Tiananmen Square was concentrated in one city, in one area. But these protests are across large parts of China. So they are unprecedented, they are remarkable, and even though they may have begun in response to the harsh zero-COVID policies, the fact that the protesters are now chanting slogans like Xi Jinping, leave, leave, and Communist Party, out, out, clearly shows that what began as anger and frustration over zero-COVID policies has become a popular uprising, and a popular uprising that is threatening to undermine one-party rule in China, and it holds major implications both for China and the world. And there are two ironies in this larger picture. The first irony is that China is the birthplace of the COVID pandemic, and now the surge of COVID cases is such that Guangzhou city in the south has just built a quarantine center for 250,000 people. That is the level of the surge in some cities and some areas. The second irony is that Xi Jinping's regime refuses to come clean on the virus's origins. and now protests at home over his COVID policies are undermining his image and standing. So we still do not know how the COVID virus began. Did it begin naturally as a spillover from wildlife, or was it triggered by the escape of a genetically engineered coronavirus from a lab in Wuhan? Wuhan is the center of Chinese research on superviruses. And Xi Jinping's regime has frustrated all efforts, including by the WHO, to conduct an independent forensic inquiry into the Wuhan labs. So given these double ironies, and given the fact that these protests are much bigger than just about COVID policies, it's clear that China today is at a watershed moment.